Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to this first podcast episode of Muslims for Help, Leaving No Kenyan Behind. This episode is entitled Muslims in Kenya, Historical and Demographic Perspectives. As we know, Muslims in Kenya cut across all races and ethnicities. Yet, they are a very misunderstood, undermined, and often stereotyped community. The purpose of these episodes is to build an investment case for having a more inclusive healthcare approach in Kenya and a more inclusive society, because we know we cannot attain universal healthcare unless we address even the religious barriers or issues that hamper access, uptake, and outcomes of health. In this episode, we shall be specifying or defining who are Muslims in Kenya, what's their distribution, and their origins, and all that. And we are very much privileged in this episode to have two experts on demographics of Muslims. I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Hassan Zovu from Moi University, Eldoret, as well as Mustafa Mahmoud Yusuf, who is from Namati Organization, the Nairobi Division Branch. So before we go further, let me invite the two guests to share something about their background. Prof, please, can you tell us why did you go into this field of studying about Islam? Karibu.
Thank you, Sade, for the invitation to be here and to participate in your podcast. I'm really excited to be one of your guests today. As you've already informed our listener, my name is Hassan Zovu, and I'm Associate Professor of Religious Studies at Moi University. In addition to that, I'm also the current chair of Department of Philosophy, Religion, and Theology at Moi University. My research interests, just for purpose of our listener, they revolve around religion and politics, female religious authority within the Islamic tradition, Islamist movements. I also write on religion and sexuality, Islamic education, and currently at the moment I'm coordinating a research project which is running for 4 years on Muslim and popular culture in Africa. So this is where I'm coming from, basically, and to a certain extent, you can say I've written extensively about Muslims in Kenya. Apart from my numerous publication, one of my first book was Muslims in Kenyan politics. So this basically has been in my areas of interest. Thank you.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. My name is Mustafa Mahmoud. I have over 12 years experience of working on issues of inclusion in focus on issues of right to nationality. And in Kenya in particular, I'm working with the Muslim community who have been subjected for years to differential treatment that is commonly referred to as vetting. And the project began with the Nubian community and branched out to other parts of the country. So my work rotates around how do we include Muslim in all spheres of life.
Thank you. So you can see we're really having experts, and we are all looking forward to learning so much from you. Professor, as we know, there's so much archaeological evidence that shows that Muslims are the longest settled people in this country. In fact, long before the country was even formulated in the late 1800s. So can you kindly explain how the Muslims entered and their migration and how into inland since is it the 7th or 8th century?
Thank you, Sade, once again. First, before I respond to your question, I think I would want to just briefly talk about the composition, and then I will link it now with the historical. With regard to just briefly about the composition of Muslims in the country in Kenya, I would like to first inform our audience that, as you've correctly said it, Islam has been associated with Kenya for many years. And some of the studies, some of the commentators have even estimated it to be not less than 1,000 years. However, despite this long tenure, this long earliest existence of Islam in the country, it is also possible to argue that it is not known when and how precisely I'm emphasizing precisely how Islam arrived in the country. But according to local chronicles, Islam is said to have arrived on the East African coast around the 7th century. And it's true, archaeological studies have been done, and according to some of these archaeological studies, they have even proved the existence of Islam in this earliest period. For instance, the study that was done on Manda Highland has confirmed Islam to have been in this area around the 10th century. Therefore, credit to its spread and expansion is attributed to a variety of factors. Why I'm saying this is because it is not possible to pinpoint one single factor to have been solely responsible to the development of Islam in Kenya. We need to appreciate that the entire process of Islamization in Kenya was long and complex. And what I mean by this is that there were multiplicity of factors that contributed to corresponding variety of different cases of conversion. And because of these numerous factors, you will notice that it explains a lot about the nature of Islam in Kenya. So with regard now to the composition of Muslims in Kenya, one will notice that Muslims in the country, they cut across geographical, ethnic, and racial boundaries. Geographically, the regions within Kenya that are predominantly inhabited by Muslims are the northern region and also along the coastal strips, which extends from Vanga in the south to Kipini in the north. And this is why one will also realize that the history of Islam in Kenya is largely associated, it is largely linked with the coastal and the northern region communities. In fact, the coast and the northern regions of Kenya, they have considered to be part of the Muslim world. And this is because Islam is part of the daily scene in this area. And what I mean by Islam being part of the daily scene in this area is that this is in terms of the way the people are dressing when you go and observe in this area. It is also in terms of the sound, the kind of sounds that people will be listening. And here, what I have in mind, maybe people will be listening to Qasida, you'll be hearing the Adhan 5 times in the day. you'd also maybe sometimes find people sitting on a baraza listening to a recorded sermon. I'm also referring to the kind of foods people are eating in these areas, and also sometimes even the types of incense that one you would smell as you walk around the neighborhood whereby the Muslims are living. So the bulk of the Muslim population in Kenya could be traced from the Somalis and the Boranas who are living in the northern region of Kenya, and also among the Digos, the Swahilis, the Arabs, and the Asians who are found living along the coast. So generally speaking, the coastal region and the northern region could also be described as the homeland of Islam in Kenya. And what I mean by this, it is because of its profound foundation that is found in this area. So in addition to the Muslim numerical strength that is found in the coastal region and the northern region, it is also added by a few pockets of Muslim population who are scattered in the various urban centers in the interior. So now I would now want to turn to your question. And first I will address the early Islamic history on the Kenyan coast. So what I can say about this is that the earliest Muslims to arrive at the present day Kenya was at the coast, and this was by the sea. And these earliest Muslims came from the Middle Eastern region. And here I'm referring in particular the Arabs and the Persian. And there are reasons as to why these earliest Muslims came or arrived at the Kenyan coast. And one of the reasons that has been advanced is that some of these earliest Muslims came as seasonal traders. There existed a long tradition of trade relations between the people living along the coastal region of Kenya and those coming from the Middle Eastern region. The other reason that had been given as to why some Muslim came to to coastal Kenya, it is them coming as visitors. They came as visitors on a temporary stays, and this perhaps could be because they were visiting some of their family members who had immigrated to the Kenyan coast and settled in some of the islands and mainland towns found along this area. So gradually, over time, the population of Muslim settlement in the region started to increase. At this point, I would also like to bring to the attention of our listener that due to lack of evidence, it is not very clear if these towns were established by the immigrants who came from the Middle Eastern region, or they were settlements that had been started by indigenous local Africans, in which the immigrants, settlers came and found them and then decided to settle in. But nevertheless, what we can say without doubt that some of the settlement towns were at least inhabited by some of the Muslim immigrants. And this is demonstrated from the ruins of mosques that are found in some of these towns that today have disappeared. However, this proof, the proof of the ruins of mosques, should not be used to claim that the Muslims exclusively lived in this settlement to the exclusion of the indigenous Africans. And why I'm saying this, it is because it is possible there are two theories here. It is possible that the establishment of these towns happened in a variety of ways. And one of the ways could be these settlements could have been started by the local indigenous non-Muslims in collaboration with the immigrant Muslims from the Middle Eastern region. The other theory it could be these settlements could have been established by the local indigenous Africans, local indigenous African, and then the immigrants came and found them and decided to come and settle in. In addition to this, the arrival, it has been recorded that the arrival of the Adhrami Sharif on the Kenyan coast, and this was around the 14th and 15th centuries, played a very critical role in the expansion of Islam in the region. And with the arrival, it resulted to some of the towns along the coastal strip developing into significant centers of Islamic learning. In addition to this, it is also reported that there was migration from the rural area to these towns, turning them to become predominantly Muslim. Although I would like also to caution our listener that it has not been precisely established as to when this process occurred.
Thank you, Prof. What I would like you to say is which towns that these migrants entered Kenya, because my understanding is Lamu, Mombasa, Malindi, because they say, is it Shungwaya around Lamu, right? So what my understanding is, yes, they came, but they didn't come with females, right? Many of them were males. So that's how they, yes, okay, go on.
Okay, I understand what you are saying, and how I can respond to this is that the towns in which Muslim permanently lived, according to studies that have been done, were found in 3 offshore islands. And these 3 offshore islands included one, the Lamu Island, together with the Bajuni Islands to the north, covering Pate, Siu, and Faza. Then 2 is the Mombasa Island, including the Kilindini village on the southern part of the island. And 3 is what has been described as the Shirazi Vumba area, of southeastern Kenya, comprising of settlements on Wasini and Funzi Island. So arguably, it is from these settlements that Muslims were able now to interact with the non-Muslim communities who were living close to them. And I will explain how. Now, from the first scenario on Lamu Highland and the Tana River area, we see from there now it was possible to see conversion of the Oromo people. And this was around 1830s. To 1900. And initially, the conversion of the Oromo is credited to have been initiated by the Nabahani Swahili of Pate. So from this interaction, a few Oromo people were converted to Islam before the end of the 19th century. While most of them remained in the Tana River area, were not converted until later, around 1930s to 1940s. And reason for their conversion have been given as follow. One, it was because of the trade relations. I've already said there existed this long mutual trade relation between the indigenous and the immigrant Swahili, immigrant Muslim, sorry. And as a result of this trade relation, conversions were gradually witnessed over time. The other reason that have been given or that has been advanced is that of intermarriages, and especially the marriage of non-Muslim Oromo women to Muslim men. Then later, during the second decade of the 19th century, some Nabahani Swahili are reported to have moved from Pate and settled in the Tana River Delta area in places such as Ozi, Kau, and Witu. And the reason for their immigration to the Tana River Delta area, the reason that has been given was because of the pressure or the hostility from the Busahidi, who wanted to take over and control the coastal strip. So with the settlement of the Nabahani around the Tana River Delta area, this facilitated the Islamization of the Pokomo around 1890s. And what I want the listener to understand is that this does not mean that the entire Pokomo community were converted to Islam, but it's what stylists have described as the lower Pokomo. That now, turning to my second scenario on Mombasa Island area, we see now the conversion of the Mijikenda in both the northern and the southern side of Mombasa. And I will explain how. Around late 1850s and early 1860s, some group of the Mazrui were reported to be moving north from Mombasa and established numerous villages in the Takaungo area, just before Malindi. And the reason for their migration from Mombasa to settle in the Takaungo area is also given to have been this hostility by the Busaidi. So some of the new villages which the Mazrui established, such as Mtanganyiko, became important centers of Islamic influence, thereby facilitating conversion among the Kauma. Kauma is one of the ethnic group within the Mijikenda. So it facilitated the conversion of the Kauma, even though there is no record of Islamization among the Kauma, but it is possible to argue that some of the earliest Kauma converts were responsible in influencing individual members from their community to embrace Islam. Still on the Mijikenda, overall, other Mijikenda groups such as the Chonyi and the Giriama have been described to have been indifferent converts. And what this means is that some of the earliest converts among the Chonyi and the Mijikenda were noted to be reluctantly practicing their new faith. And even some will renounce being Muslim after a short period. Significantly, the Giriama have been observed to have been only a minority amongst them to have been converted to Islam, whereby the majority remained or continued to follow their indigenous religious belief. So this attitude of the Giriama toward Islam was drastically different in comparison to that of the Digo, which I will explain briefly, another Mijikenda group. So I'm now moving to my third scenario on the Shirazi Vumba area. From this area, we see now the conversion of the Vumba and the Digo communities due to the influence of the Shirazi Muslim. And here, the Shirazi people who trace their origin in Shirazi, in Persia, are believed to have migrated to the East African coast, and they settled in different towns, including the Wasini area around the 10th century. So apart from this influence of the Shirazi, it is also reported that between 1830s and 1900, some Muslim traders, especially among the Arabs, the Swahili, and the Baluchi, had also established very elaborate trade relationship with the Digo. In fact, by the end of the 19th century, several Muslim traders are reported to have settled in some of the Digo villages, and thereby intensifying conversion among the Digo. So, in addition to this, it is also reported that some Mazrui family, though I've said earlier there was some Mazrui family due to the hostility of the Busaidi moved to the north, there were also some who moved to the south and settled among the Digo in Gazi. And this settlement also is known to a certain extent facilitated to the conversion of some of the Digo people to Islam. The other factor that is also highlighted to have been responsible in the development of Islam among the Digo is the spread of the Qadiriya Muslim Brotherhood south of Mombasa. This development is known to have intensified conversion among the early Digo converts around 1900. According to reports, around 1890s, Sheikh Swaleh Al-Din of the Qadiriya Brotherhood is reported to have settled in Mombasa from Brava. So from here, his order was able to gradually spread southward among the Digo, thereby facilitating the development of Islam among this community. So in a nutshell, this is what I can say as far as the earliest development of Islam along the coast. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor. We can see that there was a lot of widespread, and I must say that we needed to talk about the Swahilis, because a lot of this mixed race, of the Arabs and the indigenous groups along the coast now became what is now known as Swahilis, right? Am I right about that?
Or maybe my fellow guest would comment on that. Yeah, the Swahili, yes, I think with the Lamu scenario that I've tried to paint, and the Banabahani, I've mentioned them, Banabahani, as one of the important player, and is reported to have been from among the Swahili, is not considered from the Arabs. The Vumba, also in the south coast, is considered to be one of the Swahili dialect, and they also played a critical role in this development of Islam in various parts in south coast of Kenya. So I'm not like downplaying, but I was just trying to paint it in a very sketchy, without emphasizing on a particular community to have been responsible. As I've indicated, it has been the development of Islam.
My understanding is they were the product and output of this mixed race, because now they were no longer Arabs, right? And what does Swahili means of the coast. I'm saying, yeah, the Swahili are the mixed, it's the descendants of those early, and now, intermarried with the locals, right? I'm Swahili myself. I do not now identify, I'm Kenyan. So Swahili is a dialect, and Swahili is a community, and Swahili in the Kenya census we exist, right? Yeah. Yeah. So we are, we are from the Mazris, we are from the Nabhans, but we are also having like the Giriama, the Kauma, the Digo blood in us, right? So we are now what has emerged, and it's something that we cannot say didn't exist. It's the result of. Anyway, I don't know, Mustafa, if you'd want to comment.
What I can just mention as a footnote, what you're saying, for me, the topic on Swahili, if you look at some of the recent studies that have been done about the Swahili, I'm not an expert in Swahili, but the Islam and Swahili, they are very close. So sometimes I really attend meetings about on themes on Swahili. So some of the recent studies that have been done, they tend to reject the theory that the Swahili did not exist. They came into existence through the interaction of the locals and the immigrants, Arabs from the Middle Eastern. There is a huge pool of studies and knowledge that has been done to confirm that the Swahili are indigenous. They have been here. It is not a community that came into existence as a result of the interaction. This is what I can say up to there. I believe this was a community that was there, very different from the Arabs. Maybe they borrowed a lot from them because of that close interaction, but it was a community that was already in existence.
Well, we are Swahilis, and this is what we are told, that we have our roots in Oman and in Kenya. All right. And that's what we are told. We are the Swahilis. Yeah. The others, non-Swahilis, maybe they have other versions of that. All right. But anyway, thank you on the host. Can you also talk about the Islamization of northeastern region? Mustafa, do you want to comment on anything that Prof has presented so far?
Well, it was a learning curve for me, learning more about Islamization in the coastal region. I don't want to add to what Prof has said. I think I want to dwell more in my community and mainland Islamization in the mainland.
Yeah, thank you. But now we are going to shift focus and we are moving to, I think, Nairobi. Mustafa, welcome.
I don't think it's Nairobi per se, but yeah, yes, yeah, inland Kenya. So my role is very simple. I am supposed to just narrow down to the spread of Islam, the contribution of the Nubian community in the spread of Islam in the country. Allow me to set context by giving you background of who are the Nubians. The Nubians the Nubians came to Kenya uh, to help the British regime, and they were recruited from different parts of Sudan and also Egypt. So, with those two contexts, it will give you some of the relationships in the spread of Islam, especially the partnerships that came later on. And to go back a bit, they were recruited as slave soldiers. They were recruited without their own consent in sometimes, but later on they became autonomous in Kenya. So after successfully working with the British to secure Uganda, they were also recruited to come and secure Kenya and an attempt to also secure TZ, which had had a backlash because the Germans had also recruited the Nubians and they could not fight each other. So they decided not to fight their brothers in Tanzania. Long story short, with that context, you realize that the settlements that Nubians had are historical in terms of where colonialists wanted to secure the area from resistance. For example, you'll find the Nubians in Rift Valley, and that is because of quelling the Nandi Revolution. You'll find them in Western Kenya. And allow me to paint for you a brief of what are the key settlements that the Nubians have. The key primary settlement that we have is Kibra, or popularly called Kibera slums. And it was given to the Nubian community as early as 1889. And it was a military settlement that was gazetted specifically for the Nubian soldiers, or by then they were called the Sudanese soldiers. The other settlements that we have for the Nubian community, we have Kibigori in Kisumu, we have Migori, we have Mazeras, we have others in Kisii, and later on we had others in Isiolo, Bungoma, and Iten. And there are a bit of settlements of Nubians in Meru and other parts of the country. And all these are because of the role that they were playing in the army. And most of the time you'll find that the Nubians were either moving with their wives or marrying in those communities that they were moving to. As Professor Hassan has already said, one of the key ways of spreading Islam was intermarriages. And the Nubian community, because of their mobile nature, they used to go and marry in the communities that they moved to. For example, one of the key pillars in the Nubian community is one cafe. He's one of the prominent policemen that were there in the colonial regime. He moved all the way to Lamu by foot, and when he reached Lamu, he did not move with his wife. And when he reached Lamu, he married another wife who gave birth to one of his children that is called Abeid Cafe. Abeid Cafe is very significant in the history of the Nubian community because he's one of the scholars that played a big role in the spread of Islam and the teaching of Islam within the community. After him being born around 1918, 1920, he stayed at the coast for years, and he was being taught at the coast by one of the scholars, and he became a renowned Muslim scholar at the coast. So after him being taught, he was able to take up some teaching roles in commonly called the institution called Mombasa Institute of Muslim Education, or MIOME. And elders realized that this is one of our own. We have a gap of our children studying Islam. Why don't we go and bring him back to us to be able to teach our people what our religion is about? So they went to the coast and demanded for him to be transferred to Kibera, and he was one of the scholars that began the madrasa in Kibera around 1930, that later on became the Makina Madrasa. And apart from that, you see that in all the settlements that the Nubian community were in, they were building Islamic study areas. They were building mosques that are key in those societies to be able to teach people what Islam is about. So they played a big role in the spread of Islam in the places like Meru, Kisii, and Kibigori, Migori, and all those settlements that they had. Apart from that, we could also look at the role of building institutions, just like the Supreme Council of Kenya Muslims, which began in Kibra, and that's the reason as to why the Nubian community have always been assured of a seat in SUPKEM. So they played a big role in the setup of SUPKEM. Another role that I could look at in the community in terms of spreading Islam and contribution to Islam in general is the construction of Jamia Mosque, Nairobi Jamia Mosque. And in one of the things that the community boasts itself is that the elders who were then working for Kenya Bus and the military had given their employer strict instructions to deduct directly from their salaries, so that those money that were being deducted could help to build the Jamia Mosque itself. And this is something that we look at as a contribution because Jamia Mosque is a key pillar in the spread of Islam. up to today, and it's an iconic place for Muslims in Nairobi. Um, the Forgive me for being everywhere. You removed me from my comfort zone of talking about discrimination. But anyway, the other thing that we look at in terms of our contribution is the relationship between Al Azhar University and Makina Mosque. And Makina Mosque played a big role in terms of many scholars within the country. And they were being taught by the likes of Sheikh Mahmoud Suleiman, who was one of the scholars that were key in the community. And as early as the 80s, we had already formed, after the independence, we were able to form a partnership between Al Azhar University and Makina Jamia Mosque because of the relationship between Egypt and the Nubian. Because as I began, I had talked about our roots with Egypt. So that relationship had led to the building of one of the units in Makina Mosque, which is now the Makina Madrasa or Madrasatul Falah. Madrasatul Falah was supposed to be a sub branch of Al Azhar University, and we were able to have a lot of people who went to Al Azhar University. And one of the earliest to go was Sheikh Ismail Mohammed, who is one of the oldest scholars in Makina. He went as early as in the 1950s before Kenya getting independence. After him going, he came back, and Sheikh Mahmoud Suleiman got inspired to be able to send more people to go and study. And this is where he was able to send the likes of, especially ladies, the likes of Ustada Aziza Sebit, Mariam Yido, and other renowned scholars that went to study in Al Azhar. These women played a big role in terms of cementing the teaching of Islam in our community, and they are historical figures within the community, especially because of that relationship between Al Azhar University and Makina Jamia Mosque. The other thing that I would like to talk about is the role of media, and the KBC played a big role in terms of the spread of Islam. If you remember very well, whenever KBC was being opened, there was the opening prayer by a Muslim and a Christian. The Muslim that was making the dua before independence was Abeid, Sheikh Abeid Kafe, who was making the opening dua at 5 a.m. And later on, after independence, we had Sheikh Mahmoud Suleiman, who was making the opening dua and also the closing dua when KBC was closing the station almost midnight. So it was like a propagation of what Islam is, and many people could be able to capture it from the recitation that they were doing. Uh, uh, they allow me to continue with some of the roles, like the spread of madrasas, and we believe that Madrasatul Falah gave life to many scholars who studied under Sheikh Mahmoud Suleiman and Sheikh Ismail Mohammed, who were the renowned scholars at that time in Nairobi. And I'll allow it to be at that. But before I let it go, I wanted to say also the role of the community in donating their land for the construction of mosques played a big role, because mosques were centers of people joining together and also learning together. And the likes of Liwali Aminala, who gave their land, his land for the construction of Makina Mosque, played a big role because it is now the center of Islam within the community. Do you have any follow-up question, maybe?
For me, it's more about how your population has settled in Kibera. And, because my understanding is that you were given land from the after, is it after the, or you said from the 1800s, and so you kept on. Was this land exclusively for the Nubians, or were there other communities? Because Nairobi was divided by the colonialists, right? So we had the Arabs who came, and the Swahilis who came to settle. And then we also had the indigenous tribes moving into Nairobi, the Asians, right? So for you, the Nubians were just, Kibera was for them till today. Or that's another discussion that we need to have.
It's not another discussion. It's an interesting question because basically, if you look at Kibera, the word Kibera means forest. It comes from an Arabic word
Kibra.
Kibra.
Yeah.
So it means forest because when we were given this land after it was like a token of the recognition of the land was after the World War as a token of appreciation, but also as a way of centrally locating the Nubian community for ease of access. So as it was a forest that was given to 2,000 families of the Nubian community to be able to
Oh, it
settle,
was
and
2,000
it was
families.
2,000 families only. And those 2,000 families were given an acreage of 4,197.9 acres, and that spread from King George Hospital to Nairobi Kenya Science. King George is now Nairobi Kenyatta Hospital, and on the other
Kenyatta
side, it
Hospital.
had it went as far as Langata Gardens,
Wow.
Uhuru Garden, sorry. So it was that big.
Okay.
So even the independence of Kenya was proclaimed in Kibra itself. So this land was the only
Oh,
land after independence that was under the what is it called? Because it was an
the
exclusive
Swahili.
land. It was an exclusive land that was only for the military who were from the Nubian community, and it's very key to the history of Kenya because of that exclusion, even the British soldiers could not access Kibera without permit. And this land became a key area in the struggle of independence because the lives of Jomo Kenyatta, Dedan Kimathi, they were hidden in Kibera during the struggle of Mau Mau because it was hard for
Right.
even the British to access Kibera, and because of the exclusion that was there in Kibera, not everybody could access it. Um, so it's after the independence, the land was gazetted under Crown Land Act, and it was directly under the office of the president. It was the only land that was exclusively under the office of the president. And if you remember, if you remember the time that Kenya was trying to roll out the slum upgrading project, the former prime minister had to rally a group of tenants within the community to go to court to be able to remove that land from Crown Land Acts to become to government and other private land so that they could be able to access that land. So yeah, Kibra was an exclusive land under the King's African Rifle, specific for the Nubian or Sudanese soldiers. And after that, it was supposed to be transferred to the Nubian community. One of the problems that
But
we have is
the
the
reality
tawakul, the level of
today,
tawakul that the Nubian community had. It has haunted us to today because when the British wanted to give the Nubian community the title, they said, "This is Ardullah. This is the land. This land belongs to Allah." So the descendants now are suffering to get the tenure. But Alhamdulillah, we can say that in 2013, 2015, between 20, I think it's 2013, when Charity Ngilu was able to give the Nubian community an acreage of 270 acres of land from 4,197.9 acres. We only received 270 acres that was remaining. Now, unfortunately, the community has grown to over 20,000 people, and now
how
from
many
2,000
families now?
we have grown to over 20,000 people. Uh, you can imagine 4,000 acres was supposed to host 2,000 families, and now 270 acres is supposed to host over 20,000 people on it.
Right. Mm, very sad. Prof, do you have anything to add there or you to ask?
I wouldn't in that sense, but if Mustafa, I heard him talking about Supkem and linking it with the Nobi community. If he could expound that a little bit, it was not clear how he was relating the formation of Supkem and the Nubian community. Maybe if you could just expound.
Our role in the formation of SUPKEM, as I said, is that SUPKEM was first founded in Kibra with the scholars. The think tank of formation was in Kibra. And later on, that's the reason as to why we were able to get a permanent seat in SUPKEM. So if you can see in subsequent election in SUPKEM, you'll always see there's a seat reserved for the Nubian community.
Okay. Interesting.
It was formed as an umbrella organization. The Supreme Council of Kenyan Muslims is an umbrella organization that is supposed to coordinate all matters of interest with regards to Muslims. Other Muslim organizations like CIPK, CAMP, NAMLEF, KMYA, etc. are registered under SUPKEM. And it had many founding members, like my late father, Almarhum Ahmed Abdullah. There was Professor Abdul Ghaffur Busaidi, and many others who had the best interests of Muslims in Kenya at heart. And they worked very closely with Nubians.
So what we have not covered here is like the growth of Islam in the inland for others, because what we had was when the railway started being constructed, it's now when it opened reasons for like the Arabs who were along the coast and the Asians who were also along the coast to start moving inland. And more Asians came with the building of the railway because they were seeing trade. So that's when they started moving to Nairobi, to Kitui, to Kisumu, Kakamega, Nandi areas, Kendu Bay. You know, these were slowly moving in, even to central province like Nyeri. Yeah, so as they moved, because the colonialists, as they were building the railways, they liked the Arabs because one, they were literate. Two, because they had been there, they used to move inland. They knew the terrain much better. So they were like the guys. They moved, like when they reached Nyeri, then what I've read is like the found the Muslims very, and they actually call them Wanyohoro, which means like peace. And then and they liked the Arabs because they brought in presents like sugar, and at that time they didn't know what sugar was, so it was something they valued. And so some of the Arabs settled there and they intermarried, and so that's how, like in the Kikuyus, even Kakamega, Mumias as we say, the Arabs and Asians as well set up trading spots, and over time the Muslims grew. Like in Nandi, when you read, there's somebody who wrote his PhD on that. He says that there were 25 mosques and over 30 madrasas established in Nandi region, you know. So, and it was not called Nandi before. The name Nandi used by the Swahilis. And there are many other parts of the country that were named because of the influence of Swahilis, like Laini Saba. And I'm sure if you just look at Kenya, the map, you'll recognize. And where I think that's been there long is because of that migration. So that's what I would like to add. Does anyone want to add anything to that particular session?
I think I wanted to add just the I forgot the role of the Nubian community because during the setup of the Kenya Railway, the Nubian community were already also using the setup of the railway as a way of propagating Islam, because they are the ones who are providing security, and they were able to penetrate before the Arabs were able to come. It's just that the Arabs came and did it at large scale, but the Nubian community were already laying foundation for the spread of Islam in those areas that the railway was penetrating.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So in terms of Asians, we had Asians, Baluchi, there were many sects, Baluchi, Smileys, Ifnashari, Bohoras, Cockney, So these are the ones who went to Mumias and Manandi. We had those from Punjab who went to Kericho, Kakamega, Kisumu, Kitui, Nyeri, So we can see they penetrated a lot. I think what we haven't covered is Somalis.
Yes, thank you, Sade. In my conclusive remarks, I just wanted to touch on a key component that will affect our 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 statistics as Muslims. One of the key things that affect us as Muslims is the fact that for years we have struggled with the issues of nationality and citizenship in general. And by simple terms, citizenship is the relationship between an individual and the state. And once you are not recognized, you do not exist. And we have seen a big chunk of Muslim populations that have been stateless for years. We have the Pemba who have just gotten recognized. Their numbers were not being captured. We have the Galjil in Tana River who, up to today, they're struggling with nationality, and their nationality was scrapped off after the shifter wars. All these numbers are not being captured, and the impact in the society is not being factored in. For example, 2 years ago is when the Galjil had their first graduate in the whole community. So it's a whole aspect that comes in. And when I talk about discrimination in terms of nationality, it's because the Muslim population are subjected to differential treatment, and it has worsened by every attack that the country has had. Before the 1998 US embassy bombing, it was as simple as telling someone, catch your ears. If you're able to touch your ears, you're old enough to get an ID. After that, vetting began. And vetting was basically a security screening to show that you're not a terrorist, you're not affiliated to any terrorist community. It has escalated by every time that there's an attack. And the worst of it was the Dusit attack and the Garissa University attack, 2014. After that, we were able to have a lot of amendments to the law. For example, the Security Amendment Act that basically legalized vetting. Sections like Section 8A was amended to the Registration of Persons Act that was saying that where one's nationality is in doubt, the registrar had the discretion to form a committee that could be able to ascertain the nationality of the person whose nationality was in doubt. And this had now permanently laid foundation for the vetting of the Muslim community. As long as you had Muslim names, you were being subjected to vetting. It became worse after that, because now, after the Dusit attack, we have been able to see in the likes of Wajir, Garissa, and even in Nairobi, the Nubian community, your application cannot go forward without your parent coming to impose their own thumbprint to the application. So you'll find that there are a lot of people who have been left without IDs for over 20 years. I've been able to transverse the different parts of the country. For example, Central Kenya, where I thought that vetting did not exist, but I was able to realize that any settlement that was predominantly Muslim, those settlements, for example, in Majengo, in Nyeri, they are being subjected to vetting. When you go to Shakahola in Embu, the population of Muslim there, they are being subjected to vetting. When you go to Nakuru, the Muslim settlement there were being subjected to vetting. So it's a whole pandemic that the Muslim community has been facing for years. If you go, for example, the settlement in Nakuru is Bondeni. As long as you are a district Muslim population, you will be subjected to exclusionary practices that you have to prove. And we have seen people who have waited for 20 years, 30 years to get identity cards, and it has basically meant that they didn't exist until the day that they were registered. So it brings the question of how accurate are the statistics of Nubian Muslims out there? Are we being captured when we're not documented? How do you prove you exist when you're not documented? And this has been the work that I've been doing for years to be able to campaign on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against Muslim communities. And we've seen in 2024, the president admitting that there is vetting and it's discriminatory of the Muslim population, and he's been able to scrap it twice in 2014 and 2024 and 2025. And to me, I look at it as a win because the moment that the head of the state recognizes that this thing is unconstitutional and is discriminatory, we are able to help the Muslim population that have been left out for years. But this needs affirmative action. For example, rapid registration initiatives that could target these populations that have been left out for years. And it could help us get security of documentation for these populations. I think I wanted to bring that into perspective because for you to be known, you need to exist. And nationality is the right to exist and the right to even be counted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa, for that, passionate dialogue on something that is critical, because even citizenship is what will determine access to national resources. If you're not counted, they don't exist, so you don't get access to health, education, employment opportunities, and you just remain poor. And we know that even your wealth quintile, your knowledge, or impacts on your health seeking behavior and uptake. Thank you. Prof, do you want to comment on what Mustafa has said?
Not really much. I think I'm aware of these sentiments that most of the times that a section, let me use that expression, a section of Muslim when they are applying for document of citizenship, it has always not been easy. And here I'm talking in reference to when maybe they are applying for an ID or a passport, there are usually other layers of documents that they will be required to submit, whereby other Kenyans will not be subjected to this. Yeah, this is very unfortunate, and I'm hoping governments sometimes they have always, especially during election times, they will come in and say they will remove this and this particular obstacle and make it easier for Muslims to access this document. But sometimes they seems to only to use such rhetorics just to mobilize the Muslims to vote for them. But it is a serious issue, as Musa has indicated, that it will need to be addressed once and for all. If there are concerns, it is upon the government to see that they are able to put the right mechanism so that they can be able to work out the concern that maybe the previous government seems to have. That's what I can say.
I mean, Mustafa, please just define who is a Kenyan citizen, because you close with that, because I feel that the Nubians, the Arabs, the Swahilis, the Somalis, all these fit that definition, or don't they? What's your definition of a Kenyan citizen today?
Yeah. So the definition of Kenyan citizen is any person who was considered a Kenyan by 13th December 1963, as per the old constitution. So if you go to the sixth schedule of the constitution, in terms of who's a citizen by birth, it says is any person who was in the country by 13th December 1963, and they chose to be Kenyans at that time. Unfortunately, in the law and the interpretation is different. In the interpretation of the people who are entrusted to uphold the constitution, they say any person who's part of the tribes that were part of the tribes of Kenya by 1963 are considered to be Kenyans. So we basically have a list of an informal list of tribes that are considered to be Kenyan tribes. That's why you see politicians, they usually swear around the word 42 tribes, 42 tribes. But all these are historical. They are the 43 ethnic districts that existed for colonialism. And people translated it to be the 42 tribes of Kenya because Nairobi was not considered as an ethnic district because it was cosmopolitan. So, but the others, like the Shirazi, the Nubians, they were all classified under others. So you had to prove if you are under others, why are you Kenyan? So the rest, when you say that I'm a Luya, I'm from Western, it's easy. My clan is ABC. But the others whose clan were not well known are not considered as one of the ethnic tribes within Kenya who are being subjected to extra scrutiny. And that's one of the burdens that we had. But if you look at the history of even the Pemba, who have been in the country for years, and they consider themselves as one of the founding tribes in the country. They were only recognized as of 2 years ago when they were granted nationality. But theirs is distinct because when you look at the way citizenship by registration is conferred, you are first given certificate of registration, like the Makonde, the Shona. They were first conferred nationality by a certificate of registration, then they were given IDs. But for the Pembas, they were given IDs straightly because it was through a presidential decree. So it's also an admission that these people were left out of nationality. So in simple terms, any person who was considered to be a Kenyan, as per the interpretation of the person reading the constitution. Because if you look at also interpretation of who's a stateless person is any person who, by the time of independence in the country, was a stateless person. But then we didn't have people who were stateless. If you were in the country at that time, you were supposed to be considered a Kenyan. But anyway, it was all in the discretion of the person who was interpreting. But in the simplest of terms, is any person who was in the country and considered a citizen or a descendant of a citizen at that time.
We've talked about the historical perspective, where they came from. They came from India, Punjab, they came from the Arab world. We said Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, Syria. And then we also saw then they came along the northeastern region, although we haven't covered enough on that. That's for another day. But then many settled along the coastline, and then they were able to migrate inland as the railway was being constructed. And then we also had the Nubians that came from Sudan, and they came to support the World War One and Two. They fought. They were very brave and fearless soldiers, and they were rewarded by being settled in Kibera because by then they had no strings attached to their homeland. Unlike those that came at the coast, they established settlements as they came. And then we've heard from Mustafa the efforts of Islamization through mosques, through intermarriage. And also we have organizations that also try to do a lot of charitable work. I think, and then we've learned about the issue of citizenship is a very thorny issue, very sensitive, and Muslims have been targeted for that. Because I remember even for people at the coast, they are being told, bring your grandfathers, your grandparents' papers. And if grandparents were born before the colonial times, they didn't have birth certificates. But even those officials who are demanding for that, even their grandparents didn't have those certificates. I mean, everyone was in the same boat. But anyway, at least this is an issue that's being resolved. I want to thank you all for listening. I know it's been a very interesting conversation, and I hope that you are able to follow the different dimensions that we try to present. Prof, I request for you to also share some closing remarks, any highlights that you want to give.
Okay. Thank you, Saad. And I think you've summed it very well, but I can also make some addition just for the clarity of our listeners. That what we try to share in this podcast is about, let me still use the word that the composition of Muslims in Kenya. And we've indicated that there is no doubt, no one can dispute that Islam has had the longest tenure existence in the country than any other religious community. Let me use in terms of community, not ethnic, than any other religious community. And we've shown that it has been in this country way back from the 8th century, and the studies have been done to confirm that. We also need to appreciate that there have been different factors that have been responsible for Islamization. We cannot pick just one particular point, factor, and say this was responsible. The different factors, as Mustafa has also shown with the case of the Nubians, they have also, to in a certain way, contributed to the development and the spread of Islam in the country. We also need to note that if you are talking about the mapping, we can just use map, but as I also have indicated that uh, we also need to appreciate that when we talk about Islam in the country, yes, it is found throughout the country, but there are places specifically in Kenya whereby we can say these are the homeland of Islam in Kenya, and this is the northern region and the coastal region. And the predominant, I know Muslim would be found across various communities, all the communities in the country, even those who are like 95% Christian, you still find Muslim, but I don't want to go to that. If you talk about a predominant Muslim community, we can talk about the Swahili, we can talk about the Arabs, we can talk about the Digo among the Mijikenda, because I will be very reluctant to include other Mijikendas. We can talk about the Somalis, we can talk about the Borana, and then we add the list. So this would what would form as the bulk of the Muslim population. But you can also go and pinpoint the minute groups whereby pockets of Muslim population will be found in the country. This is what I would want to sum up for my part. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I think we also need to build a case for verification of the number of Muslims. There are many reasons why they're not counted, why maybe they were undercounts, because if you go to pastoralists, maybe they don't operate from a standard household. They're in the bush seeking, grazing for their cattle. Maybe they're not registered because they're not aware, lack of awareness of when the census is and what it means. Or even when they are being registered, maybe they will give another ethnic group for fear of, maybe they don't know why they're being counted. So some of them, when they're asked what tribe, they'll call themselves Kenyans, or they'll say a tribe which they think, oh, this one is more popular and are more likely to be counted, maybe. So there are many reasons why people might not self-identify themselves as Muslims during a census, or self-identify their correct ethnic group. Yeah. And also, like, we had Asians who, it was only the 2019 census where they featured. For the longest time, they were not being counted as Asians. So I hope that the data I've shown is that we need to understand, why some places are decreasing, and whether we can also use places of worship as a location for estimating populations. But again, that's a discussion for another day. And also, I hope that we'll have another day to focus on the northeastern Muslim migration and history and all that. But I thank you all, and I'm very much appreciative of having you, Professor Hassan, and also Mustafa, this discussion. And with that, I say thank you and goodbye.